Compassion is often seen as the highest spiritual virtue. In spiritual communities, empathy is celebrated, understanding is praised. The ability to hold space for others' pain is considered an enlightened quality. But what if I told you that compassion itself can become a trap? Carl Jung warned that compassion, when unexamined, can become a psychological escape, one that prevents real growth and authentic selfhood. Today, we're exploring a rarely discussed but critically important idea: when empathy is used to avoid the self. If you're ready to go beyond surface-level spirituality and explore the shadow side of even our most cherished virtues, subscribe to Empire of the Mind. We dive deep into the uncomfortable truths that lead to real transformation. Hit that subscribe button, you won't regret it. 1. What spiritual bypass really means. Let's start by defining our terms, because spiritual bypass is one of those phrases that gets thrown around without people really understanding what it means. Spiritual bypass occurs when spiritual ideals, practices, or beliefs are used to avoid psychological work. It's when we use enlightened concepts to sidestep the messy, uncomfortable process of actually dealing with our wounds, anger, needs, and limitations. And here's Jung's radical insight. Any virtue can become a defense if it protects the ego from truth. Think about that for a moment. Even love, even compassion, even forgiveness, these beautiful, necessary qualities can be weaponized by the psyche to avoid growth. For empaths specifically, compassion can hide several deep fears: the fear of conflict, the fear of separation, and the fear of self-assertion. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone repeatedly crosses your boundaries. They show up late, cancel plans, and take advantage of your generosity. Your gut tells you something is wrong. You feel resentful. You feel used. But instead of addressing it directly, you tell yourself, I should be more understanding. Maybe they're going through something. I need to have more compassion. Spiritual people don't get angry over small things. On the surface, this is maturity. It looks like emotional intelligence. It looks spiritual. But Jung would ask, are you being compassionate or are you being afraid? Are you choosing love or are you avoiding the discomfort of being honest? Are you being understanding or are you being self-erasing? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Being loving often becomes safer than being honest. Compassion becomes a shield that protects us from the terror of conflict, from the risk of being disliked, from the vulnerability of asserting our own needs. And when compassion is used this way, it's not spiritual growth. It's a spiritual bypass. 2. Why empaths fall into this trap. So why do empaths, in particular, fall into this trap? Why is spiritual bypass so seductive for highly sensitive people? The answer usually goes back to childhood. Empaths are often rewarded early for being understanding. They learn that being the good one, the mature one, the one who doesn't cause problems, brings approval, safety, and sometimes even survival. Jung would say the persona of the good one forms a social mask that becomes so identified with the self that you forget it's a mask at all. Think about it. If you grew up in a chaotic home, maybe being the peaceful one kept you safe. If you had a volatile parent, maybe being endlessly understanding prevented outbursts. If you had siblings who were difficult, maybe being the easy child was how you got love. Over time, the empath learns a devastating set of beliefs. Anger is dangerous. Needs are selfish. Boundaries feel unspiritual. Conflict means failure. Being difficult means being unlovable. So compassion becomes identity rather than choice. It becomes something you must be, not something you choose to express. And that's when it becomes a trap. Because here's what happens. When compassion is your identity, you can't afford to have moments where you're not compassionate. You can't afford to be angry. You can't afford to say no. You can't afford to prioritize yourself. Your entire sense of worth becomes dependent on your ability to be endlessly understanding, endlessly available, endlessly forgiving. And the psyche? The psyche learns to use compassion as a way to avoid the terrifying prospect of being authentic. Because authentic means sometimes you're not nice, sometimes you're angry, sometimes you choose yourself over others, sometimes you disappoint people. And if your entire identity is built on being the compassionate one, authenticity feels like death. So, you bypass. You use spiritual language to justify self-abandonment. You call it holding space, when really you're just avoiding confrontation. You call it unconditional love, when really you're just afraid of being rejected. This is the empath's temptation to hide behind compassion rather than do the harder work of being whole. 3. How narcissists benefit from spiritual bypass. Now here's where this gets really interesting and really dark. Narcissists unconsciously sense when compassion lacks boundaries. They can smell spiritual bypass from a mile away, and they interpret endless understanding as permission. Think about the dynamics here. The empath has learned to bypass conflict through compassion. The narcissist has learned to bypass accountability through charm and manipulation. And when these two patterns meet, they create a perfect storm. The empath says, "I understand why you did that. I know you're struggling. I can hold space for your pain." The narcissist hears, "I can do whatever I want, and you'll make excuses for me." Jung warned that the shadow ignored does not disappear, it gets acted out. And in these dynamics, both people are avoiding their shadow. The empath is avoiding their shadow of anger, of self-assertion, of healthy selfishness. They're avoiding the part of them that wants to say, "No, stop, this is not okay." The narcissist is avoiding their shadow of vulnerability, of accountability, of genuine remorse. They're avoiding the part of them that knows they're causing harm. And so, a dance begins. The empath absorbs pain, and the narcissist avoids accountability. The empath thinks they're being spiritual. The narcissist thinks they're being clever. But both are trapped in unconscious patterns that prevent real growth. Jung would say that what looks like compassion in the empath is often codependency dressed in spiritual clothing. And what looks like confidence in the narcissist is often terror dressed in arrogance. Neither person is whole. Neither person is integrated. And the relationship becomes a mutual agreement to avoid the self. This is why spiritual bypass is so dangerous. It doesn't just harm you, it enables others to remain unconscious as well. Your refusal to set boundaries becomes their permission to avoid growth. 4. Jung's solution: integrated compassion. So what's the way out? How do we practice compassion without bypassing ourselves? Jung did not reject compassion. That's important to understand. He wasn't advocating for selfishness or cruelty. He insisted that compassion must be integrated with self-respect, truth, and limits. True compassion, Jung believed, includes the self. Let me say that again because it's crucial. True compassion includes the self. Compassion that excludes you is not compassion. It's self-betrayal masquerading as virtue. Integrated compassion means you can hold space for someone's pain and honor your own limits. You can understand why someone behaves the way they do and still hold them accountable. You can be loving and honest. You can be kind and boundaried. This is what Jung meant by integration. It's not choosing between compassion and self-respect. It's holding both. It's developing the psychological complexity to be with paradox. And this is hard. It's much easier to be all compassion or all boundaries. It's much simpler to be entirely selfless or entirely selfish. But integration requires us to be both, and rather than either or. Jung would say that mature compassion looks like this. I see that you're in pain. I understand that your behavior comes from your wounds, and I will not allow you to treat me poorly. I have compassion for your struggle, and I have respect for my own needs. I can hold space for your experience, and I can be honest about mine. This is compassion with consciousness. This is empathy with integrity. This is love with limits. And here's what's beautiful about this. When compassion is integrated, it becomes sustainable. Because you're not constantly abandoning yourself, you don't burn out. Because you're not constantly overriding your needs, you don't become resentful. Because you're not using spirituality to avoid truth, you actually grow. Integrated compassion also means being willing to feel uncomfortable. It means allowing yourself to disappoint people. It means accepting that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, set a boundary, or let someone experience the consequences of their choices. This is advanced spiritual work. This is the kind of compassion that requires tremendous inner strength, not the weakness of constant accommodation. So, let me leave you with this. Compassion that erases the self is not spiritual. It's not evolved. It's not enlightened. It's a defense mechanism dressed in spiritual clothing. Jung's reminder echoes across decades. Love without consciousness becomes self-betrayal. And perhaps the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself and for others is to stop using empathy as an escape from the harder work of being whole. Stop hiding behind understanding. Stop using compassion to avoid conflict. Real love includes truth. Real kindness includes boundaries. Real spirituality includes the self. If your compassion requires you to abandon yourself, it's not compassion, it's a cage. And if this message hit home for you, if you're ready to explore what real spiritual maturity looks like beyond the platitudes, subscribe to Empire of the Mind. We're building a community of people who aren't afraid to look at the shadow side of even our most cherished virtues. Join us. Click that subscribe button. The work we're doing here matters. Until next time, practice compassion, but don't forget to include yourself in that circle of care. Because you deserve your own empathy too.